You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's well, nice to meet both you and Monica virtually, but sort of in real life. um, and hopefully I can catch up on time a little bit. We'll see. So I'm going to jump right in. Before actually, sorry, give me just a second. Of course, the Zoom controls are in the way. All right. Okay, I think we should be good now. So I'm going to take a quick step back in time. I'm going to go back to before RMarkdown. I'm not sure if any of you were around during that time, but I sure was. I was actually writing my PhD thesis, and my workflow looked something like the screen you see here, which is an absolute mess. So I wrote my R code in something like a notepad type thing, pretty much just plain text. You can see in the lower left corner there, I have a section of code highlighted. I would then save any important output and images to folders that were supposedly organized in some fashion. So this would include the plot that you see there on the right, although it wouldn't have been a ggplot at the time. And this also might have included like trying to save some code output from like the CommSchool. Then I'd try to make notes in my code file of like what I named the images. So you can see here like the code for tomato harvest 2021 image. And then lastly, I would put this all together. At the time it was in a LaTeX document, but when I sort of moved on to industry, it would have been into a Word document. And then during this whole process, I would hope that I wouldn't forget what or where everything was. And yeah, that was not great. I somehow put together my thesis in one document. Hold on a second here, something zoomed in on my computer. I'm not quite sure what happened. Oh well, I'll do my best. Yeah, so I put my thesis together, but don't tell anyone. I actually see my advisor, Sandy Weisberg's, one of his collaborators is on this meeting, so don't tell him, but it'd be really hard for me to put that back together again. So enter RMarkdown. I imagine it sounds like a lot of you are R users. If you are, I imagine you've used RMarkdown. This was introduced in 2012, just after I finished my thesis. I thought it was like the most magical thing when I first saw it. I could write all my code, all my words, have all of my output in this one place. If there was a change I needed to make, I could easily do that without having to figure out like, where was this output that I, wrote this code for? It has made my life so much easier. And it's probably the thing I talk about most when I try to convert people to using R. It would be very difficult for me to go back to the old way of doing things, and I have yet to do that. And I continue to look for ways that RMarkdown can make my life easier. So now I'm going to redirect you to the photo of my garden. I joke that it's my third child in the summers. So I'm sure you're also wondering, what does Lisa's garden have to do with parameterized reports? Well, not only do I harvest fruits and vegetables from my garden, but I also collect data from my garden too. So as a simple example, we're going to say I want to create a report for each vegetable that highlights how its weight compares to other vegetables, shows weights of different varieties of that vegetable, and graphs cumulative harvest for that vegetable over time. So let's take a look at the report I created for tomatoes. I'm just going to play this video real quick. Hopefully that comes through. So you can just kind of see all the pieces of the report here. It's a very simple report. I'm purposely keeping this very simple. And then let's go ahead and scroll through the code. that was used to create the report. So here, I've just tried to highlight the places where the word tomatoes is used in the code. And just to think about, if I wanted to create the same report with a different vegetable, you know, I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to go back through here and, you know, find all the spots where I use the word tomatoes and manually change that. You can also see that sometimes I didn't use the word tomatoes, sometimes it's the word tomato. So, you know, maybe that would somehow cause problems. Oops. Hold on a second. Okay, so as I just mentioned, trying to replicate this new report using find and replace wouldn't be very fun. You might think about a solution like setting up a variable at the beginning of the code, like that I could change every time I want to change the report. That would solve some of our problems, but it wouldn't give us a way to sort of programmatically run this report, which I'm going to talk about later. So in order to really solve all of our problems, we're going to introduce something new. We're going to introduce a parameter to the YAML header. So in this case, there's a sort of new argument up here called params. Its value is parameter is called vegetable, and then its initial value is going to be tomatoes. Let me start this video. So once I run a section of code, or like if I knit the file, the parameter is accessible via this params $, and then the name of the parameter. So in this case, params $vegetable, and then this will return tomatoes since that was my initial value. And then I can use params $tomato throughout the code. I'm just going to point out a few examples. So here I use it to create a variable that will be used to color the tomatoes differently in a bar graph and in a chart. And then in this next spot, I use it to add the word tomatoes to the section header. And as I'm scrolling through the code, you can probably see more params $vegetable. I tried to highlight it by putting check it out up there. So if you look through the code later, you'll see that. And then this last example shows where I use it to put the words the word tomatoes in a ggplot title. And then just to kind of give you a sense of what happens, that was the code. And then what does it look like when you sort of knit your file? So on this first page, this was from the YAML header. So this is what I typed into the RMD file up in that YAML header. And then in the knitted file, you can see that the word tomatoes shows up. And then in this one, this was the place where I used this parameter to help me create a variable so that the tomatoes bar was highlighted in a different color in the bar plot. And then here we see the word tomato shows up in the title of the ggplot. So, you know, now I have my tomatoes report, right? You're probably sick of tomatoes by now. Now let's say I want to create another one for lettuce. So we have a couple options. Let me play this video here. One would be to manually go in there and change the vegetable to lettuce. I can then knit the file, and if we give it just a second, you'll see that it produces that same report, but for lettuce. You can see lettuce show up in the title. You can see lettuce is highlighted in the table and on the graph. And then it's now the cumulative harvest for lettuce and showing the table of the lettuce varieties. So we could do that, but that still feels like pretty manual. Like I have a couple dozen different types of fruits and vegetables. I don't really want to go do that manually. So the other option is to use change this more programmatically. So we can use the render function to do that. So there's 3 arguments in this function. The the input gives the path and file name of the parameterized report. I'm using the here package to kind of get to my file paths. The output file gives the path and file name of the output file. So in this case, I've called it lettuce_example.html. And this params argument gives the value of the parameter in a list with the name of the parameter and equal sign, and then the new value of the parameter. And if there was more than one parameter, you could add more parameters by separating them by commas in this list of the params argument. Oops. So even in that previous code I just showed you, if I were to use that, let me just hop to that page again, sorry. If I were to use this, I'd still have to go back and like manually change lettuce, you know, to whatever other fruit or vegetable I'm going to use. So I can sort of write some more complex code, although still fairly short, that allows me to sort of run all these reports all at once. So this very top set of code just creates a vector of all the vegetables with more than 2 harvests. So, you know, maybe I don't want to make the report if I only harvested a vegetable once. This next set of code creates a table called reports. And this table has a variable named input. This is just going to be that sort of starting RMD file. The output file is going to be a vector of where the final reports will live. So it'll be their, you know, their path plus their file name. So here I'm using some code so that the final file name is the name of the vegetable -report.html. And then the last argument is the params, very similar to what I showed on the previous page. This might look like some funky code, but in the end, this will give us a vector of sort of like the way it needs to be written. And I think this is best if I just show you what it looks like. So that last column will end up looking like this. So it's in that format needed to feed into that render function. And then lastly, I have this extremely short set of code that will actually go and create all of those reports. I'm not going to run this right now. It takes like, I mean, this data set is not all that big, but it does take like a little bit of time to run. So not going to waste your time with that. So yeah, that's sort of a quick intro to parameterized reports. The example I showed you is obviously really simple. If you want to see some really sort of cool ways that people are using parameterized reports, I have a bunch of links on this page. I'll just point out that this very last one is by David Kais, who's speaking, I believe, at the end of the day today. And if you want to learn more about parameterized reports, there's some great resources out there, which I've linked to here. The last one is about using Quarto to create parameterized reporting. I don't have the newest version of RStudio yet at work, so I have yet to venture into Quarto, but I hope to do that soon, and I will definitely be using that resource myself. And I think that's it. So I have all this on my GitHub page. Hopefully that helps.